Hi everyone, you are welcome to today's class. My name is Temi. I am a photographer. In our last class, we discussed about introduction to photography. And in today's class, we'll be talking about the exposure triangles. The exposure triangle. And before we move on, if you are watching this video, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, like, share, and also comment. The most vital and important technical piece you need to master in photography is called what? Exposure. I come again. The most important and vital technical piece you need to understand and you need to master most in photography is called exposure. As a photographer, you get control how much light that enters into your camera. If you let in too much light into your camera, the picture will be overexposed. That is, it will be too bright. And if you let in lower light, the picture will be what? Very dark. So as a photographer, you need to understand the basic concept of the exposure triangles. Your exposure is determined by three settings in your camera. Number one, the aperture. Number two, the shutter speed. Number three is the ISO. Now, before I move on to the explanation of these three concepts, I need you to subscribe to my channel, like, comment, and if you have questions, please endeavor to drop it on the comment section. Thank you. You see these three powerful settings, the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO. They have their own purposes. In photography, they have their own purposes. The relationship to one another determines the overall exposure. The relationship between them determines the what? The overall exposure in photography. Finding the right balance and understanding what each one does, how it affects each other, will give you the understanding of how you create your beautiful images. Aperture is the opening in a lens through which light passes to enter the camera. The aperture of a lens is the diameter of a lens opening, which is usually controlled by an iris. The larger the diameter of the aperture, the more light reaches into the image sensor. Aperture is expressed as f-stop. Now, on your camera, you see something that indicates f. We have f1.8, f2.8, f3.0, f3.5, f4.0, f4.5, and so on and so forth. Are you getting what I'm saying now? Now, the larger the number of the aperture, that is the number of the f, probably f7, f8, now the lower light comes into it. For instance, if I put my aperture on 5.0, 6.0, 6.5, 7.5, now the aperture will be what? Will be narrow. That is, there will be a very small opening on the lens. But if I put my aperture on 1.8, 2.8, do you understand? The aperture will have a wide opening. That's how aperture works. I come again. The more the number, the larger the number of the aperture, the lower the what? The lens opening. The lower the number of the f-stop, the larger the lens opens. Do you understand what I'm saying now? Now, in your camera settings, if you put your aperture on f1.8, f2.8, 3.0, you discover that the lens will have a wide opening so that light will be able to come into the camera. But if I put the aperture on f3.5, 4.0, 4.5, 5.0, 6.0, 6.5, 7, and so on and so forth, the lens will have a very narrow opening. Light will not be able to do to penetrate. So that's how aperture works. Now, with the help of an aperture, there's what we call depth of field. Along with controlling the amount of light that enters into your camera, the aperture also determines the depth of field of an image. Now, there's what we call shallow depth of field. A shallow depth of field allows you to throw the background of your image out of focus. That is, when shooting an object and you discover that the background is blurred, it means you have a shallow depth of field. And to get that, you need to set your aperture on 1.5, a lower number 1.5, 1.8, 2.0, 2.8, and you have to move far away from the object. Do you understand me now? You have to do what? Move far away from the subject so that the lens will lose focus on the background and focus more on the subject. Now take a look at the image on your screen. You discover that the background of the image has lost focus, and the main focus is on what? Is on the image. That is because the aperture is on 1.8, 2.0 or 2.8. If you want to get this kind of depth of field, you move far away from the object and set your aperture on f1.8, f2.0, f2.8. It will make the background to lose focus, and the main focus on the aperture of the lens will be on the object. Now the second exposure triangle on your camera is the ISO. ISO is simply a camera settings that determines how bright or how dark a photograph is. Your image will become brighter when you increase the ISO settings on your camera. Now the ISO starts from 100. From a lower number we have 100, 200, 300 to 1006, depending on the camera you are using. Some camera has 1008, some has 2000. That's higher exposure. As a result, ISO will help you capture images in low light situations, or more flexible with your aperture and your shutter speed settings. ISO controls how sensitive your camera is to light. If you have a lower ISO like 100, your picture will be dark. While if you have ISO like 300, 400, 500, 600, 800, 1006, 2000, your picture will be exposed to light. Now this is how ISO works. The higher the number, the brighter the picture, and the lower the number, the darker the picture. As a photographer, the first thing you have to do, or you have to notice in your camera settings, is your ISO. Don't forget, if you have higher number, you have a brighter picture, and if you have a lower number, you have a darker picture. That's how ISO works. Now the third point we'll be talking about in the exposure triangle is called the shutter speed. What is shutter speed? Shutter speed controls how long light enters into your camera. Shutter speed is measured as a fraction of 1 second. You can see it written as a fraction of 1/125 or 1/300 or 1/400, depending on the settings you want. When shooting in shutter priority mode, your aperture will change immediately you change your shutter speed settings on your camera. By using a slow shutter speed, such as 1/30, 1/40, 1/50, 1/60, and so on, your camera will select a narrow aperture to compensate how long light enters into the lens. Now this is how shutter speed works. If I choose a shutter speed of 1/30, 1/20, 1/60, 1/90, and I'm snapping a moving object like a car or someone is moving, you will discover that the object will be some part of the object will be blurred, because the light that entered into the lens is just little. Do you understand me now? But if I choose a fast shutter speed like 1/250, 1/200, 1/400, 1/500, 600, and so on, it will freeze the object. If I want to snap a moving car now and I set my shutter speed on 1/800 or 1/1000, it will freeze the movement of the car for me to get a perfect shot. So that's how shutter speed works. We have the slow shutter speed and we have the fast shutter speed. Slow shutter speed is when you put your shutter speed on 1/30, 1/50, 1/60, 1/70. Now if you are snapping a moving object with that kind of shutter speed, you are going to get some part of the image will be blurry. Now take a look at the image on your screen. You discover that some part of the object is blur. Now this is how fast shutter speed works. If I put my shutter speed on 1/500 1 over 600, 1 over 300, even 1 over 400, it is going to freeze the what? The object. Even if I'm snapping a moving car and my shutter speed is on 1 over 1000, 1 over 800, it's going to freeze the moment of that object. So this is how shutter speed what? This is how shutter speed works. Now I need to understand the basic element of these exposure triangles. You know, I told you we have the shutter speed, we have the aperture, and we have the ISO. Now for the aperture, the smaller the number, that is, the smaller the f-stop. For instance, we have f1.8, f2.8, and so on and so forth. The smaller the number, the brighter the picture. That is, the more light enter into the what? Into the camera. While the larger the number, for instance, we have f4.5, f5.0, f5.5, f6.0, f6.5, and so on. Depending on the camera settings you have, the lesser the what? The light that enters into the what? Into the camera. That's how aperture works. For the shutter speed, if you choose a lower number, a lower fraction number, for instance 1 over 30, 1 over 40, 1 over 50, you discover that the part of the image will be what? Will be blur. That's how it works. But if you choose a higher number fraction, for instance 1 over 400, 1 over 500, 1 over 600, 1 over 1000, it is going to freeze the what? The movement of the image. Do you understand what I'm saying now? So that's how shutter speed works. Here comes to the end of today's class. If you find this video helpful to you, please endeavor to subscribe, like, comment, and share. And if you also have questions, please endeavor to ask on the comment section. Don't forget to follow us on all our social media handles. On Instagram at Kayode_visuals, on TikTok Kayode_visuals, on Facebook Kayode Visuals. See you all in our next class. Thank you.